Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping barefoot onto the red, sun-baked earth of southeastern Nigeria, where the lanterns have just been lit, and the aroma of roasted plantains swirls through the air. You squint past the flickering flames to find clusters of people gathering, women balancing bundles on their heads, traders unrolling mats, children darting between woven baskets full of kola nuts and smoked fish. It's market day in Igboland, and here's the twist. No coins, no bills, not even a swipe of a dusty credit card machine. Just trade eye contact and centuries of doing things the beautifully difficult way. Yes, you're about to learn how an entire civilization operated on vibes, memory, and an impressive amount of bartered goats. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this economy if you're bad at math or allergic to social nuance. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's falling asleep where. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down the narrow, packed dirt path between towering banana leaves and crooked fences made of woven sticks. It's just after dusk and your arms are full of cassava you've carried in a raffia basket from your uncle's farm. You're heading to the community market, a moonlight gathering that pulses with life every 4 days. You hear drums in the distance, rhythmic and low like a heartbeat passed between villages. You step into the clearing, and boom, it's like entering a dimension powered entirely by people's memory and trust. There's no register clinking, no receipts rustling, just conversations layered over laughter, haggling that sounds half like flirting, and a deep, unspoken understanding of how much a gourd of palm wine is worth when someone really, really needs it. A woman squats beside you, inspecting your cassava. She points to a tightly folded length of indigo-dyed cloth and nods. No words needed, you both know that's a fair deal. No calculator, no change, no please insert chip. Just an exchange. And the tiniest nod of satisfaction when the transaction ends. Now here's your first fun fact to chew on like dried mango. For generations, the Igbo people ran a remarkably complex economy without a formal currency. That's right, no centralized mint, no coins with stern faces, no inflation graphs on goatskin parchment. Just a sprawling, flexible system of barter reputation, social obligations, and a side order of spiritual accountability. And the fringe tidbit you didn't expect. Some Igbo communities even treated certain storytelling sessions like informal tax records. If someone had a reputation for dodging communal dues, you bet that griot would slip their name into a fable about a trickster monkey who always forgets to bring his yams to the feast. Social shame. Oh, it's way more powerful than late fees. You walk on, soaking in the market's rhythm. Someone calls out from a mat where dried pepper is piled like tiny volcanic rubble. You recognize her. She's the sister of the man who once lent your cousin a goat during last year's festival, which means she'll probably give you a better deal. You nod and approach your cassava still snug in your basket. In Igbo land, your social web is your credit score. Historians still argue whether this barter system developed purely out of necessity or if it was deliberately maintained as a form of economic sovereignty. After all, resisting external currencies kept trade intensely local and community-bound. There were no outsiders swooping in with shiny coins to disrupt the fragile but functional balance of yam for fish logic. Evenings like this aren't just markets, they're memory palaces. You hear old women reminding each other that so-and-so still owes them palm oil from last time. You hear a teenage boy reciting a chain of trades that started with kola nuts and ended with a chicken. He gets a few laughs, but nobody corrects him, which means he probably got it right. You pause near a stall, where a man is trading calabashes of fermented palm wine for smoked bushmeat. You listen in. It's less a transaction and more a gentle argument that ends with laughter, a slap on the back, and one extra gizzard tossed in for friendship. There's a phrase you hear often, Onye agala, nwana ya, let no one leave his brother behind. It's a proverb, sure, but it's also a sort of economic doctrine here. And get this, some Igbo clans had symbolic trade oaths sworn during market pacts that involved chewing cola nuts in sacred sequence. If you broke the terms of a trade sealed this way, you weren't just a jerk, you were cursed. Like might wake up with hiccups for life cursed. Barter plus spiritual deterrent equals long-term compliance. A breeze rustles through warm and thick with the scent of smoked fish, hibiscus, and goat dung. Your cassava is lighter now, swapped for cloth, some spicy powder you probably overpaid for, and a carved amulet you didn't ask for but couldn't resist. You're not sure if you won or lost the market today. But that's not really the point. Because here trade is less about precision and more about balance, social, spiritual, emotional. There are no receipts, but everyone remembers. Everyone must remember. It's the only way the whole thing stays afloat. As the moon hangs high and the lanterns flicker lower, you sit by a tree and watch the crowd thin. Traders laugh as they pack up. A small boy counts yams with his toes. Somewhere behind you, a woman sings softly as she folds the last of her cloth. There's no cash box to lock. No ledger to tally. Just satisfied nods and the knowledge that next market day, it all begins again. And if you think that sounds chaotic, well, it is. But it works. And sometimes it works better than modern systems with all their spreadsheets and supply chains. You stretch your legs and sigh. One market down. 4 more days until the next. Maybe next time you'll bring something harder to value, like a story, or that gourd of honey you've been hoarding. Until then, sleep easy. Your economy runs on trust, and that's the real currency of dreams. You wake with sore legs, and the faint taste of smoked plantains still in your mouth. It's early, but the sun already casts warm streaks across the reddish earth, and there's a quiet hum in the air, like the land itself is waiting. You hoist a new basket onto your head, not full this time, just hopeful. Today you're heading to another village, one with salt. Your village, yams. So many yams. You've been eating yams, boiled, pounded, fried, dried, grated. Frankly, you're a little yammed out. But somewhere beyond that stretch of tangled forest and sleepy hills is someone craving your excess in exchange for something you desperately need. It's the trade logic. Here I have too much of this. You have too much of that. Let's fix our lives together. No currency needed, just mutual inconvenience and cooperation. You hike along the narrow path, flipping through mental calculations. 2 large bundles of yam should get you a palm-sized cone of salt. Maybe some fish if you throw in a gourd of palm wine. You hope the trader you meet today had a good breakfast. Haggling on an empty stomach never ends well. By the time you reach the market square, the smell of salt, sharp, briny, unmistakable, is already in the air. It's not like ocean salt, though. This comes from shallow earth pans a village over dried and collected by women who sing to the sky while they work. 1 scoop of this stuff can preserve meat flavor soup or buy you enough firewood to last a week. You approach the salt woman, cautiously bow slightly, and offer your yams with the kind of expression that says, "These are the premium yams." She inspects them with all the seriousness of a royal jeweler. There's no scale here, just practiced eyes, calloused hands, and a kind of inherited intuition. She finally nods and pours a generous amount of salt into your calabash. No words exchanged. That's how you know it's a fair trade. It's tempting to romanticize this, imagine a world where everything works on perfect cooperation. But here's your historical dose of reality. Barter systems like this, elegant as they may seem, were built on deep social contracts, constant negotiations, and sometimes, let's be real, petty drama. People remembered debts, they held grudges, and occasionally someone just refused to trade because you once insulted their dog or sneezed during a wedding. The economy was personal. Historians still argue whether barter was the primary system or just one layer in a more intricate economic web. Some claim that kinship obligations, ritual exchange, and delayed reciprocity, a fancy term for "I'll get you back later," formed an even bigger part of the trade network. Others insist that market days were where true value was determined through vocal negotiation and a few subtle power moves involving yams and eyebrow raises. Now let's detour for a second to one of the weirder little quirks in this system. Imagine this: there were known conversion rates between certain goods, but they weren't written anywhere. Instead, people learned them by experience, gossip, and apprenticeship. For example, if you knew that 3 wraps of cloth usually fetched 1 calabash of palm oil, and palm oil fetched a basket of dried fish, you could perform market alchemy like some backwoods Wall Street analyst. Triangular trading, baby, but without the fraud. You overhear a trade negotiation between a woman with a stack of clay pots and a man offering smoked catfish. The conversation is friendly, but detailed: how much smoke, which river was the catfish fed, yams or cassava peel. It's less about the item and more about the story behind the item. Trade here isn't just transactional, it's narrative. At one point, someone tries to trade cloth dyed with poor indigo. You can tell by the uneven streaks it'll fade in a week. The other trader isn't fooled either. He laughs, claps the dyer on the back, and walks away shaking his head. Reputation ruined for the day. Quality control handled with public embarrassment. Try that with modern corporate lawsuits. And here's something else to remember: children learned this system by doing. There were no textbooks, no PowerPoint slides explaining the value of bushmeat versus snail shells. You just watched, copied, and when you were finally ready, bartered your first gourd of honey for a calabash of millet and hoped no one scammed you too hard. Welcome to Financial Literacy Igbo Edition. You rest in the shade beside a trader selling dried pepper. She's loud, confident, and possibly capable of haggling the moon out of the sky. She gestures at a man offering snails, fresh ones still squirming in a woven basket. The two of them argue joyfully for 10 minutes before finally agreeing on a pile of pepper and a small cooking pot as fair trade. A bystander claps in appreciation. Deals here, they're basically public theater. One last thing before you start dozing off: even though this barter system seems hyper-local, it wasn't isolated. Igbo traders regularly traveled across vast regions to meet with other communities. They traded salt for ivory cloth, for kola nuts, fish for iron tools. Over time, these exchanges formed massive trade loops that connected thousands of people without a single coin ever changing hands. It was commerce by conversation, logistics via gossip. So you head home, salt in your calabash brain, buzzing with mental exchange rates and stomach grumbling because you forgot to trade for lunch. Another market day done. Another tiny masterpiece of economic improvisation, painted without a ledger in sight. And still no money. The rooster's crowing again. You wish it wouldn't. Your arms are sore from carrying yesterday's trade haul. Your legs ache from walking miles barefoot. And your mind is still replaying that awkward moment when you accidentally tried to barter with a widow during her mourning period. Spoiler, not ideal. But today you've got bigger things on your mind. You're heading to the Oracle's shrine, and no, not for spiritual enlightenment, but for a different kind of transaction entirely. You've been sent by your aunt to offer a goat in exchange for divination. Apparently, someone's been stealing her okra, and she wants answers. You don't ask questions mostly because the oracle doesn't appreciate questions, especially not from tired nephews with mud on their knees and goat hair stuck to their tunic. You walk quietly leading the goat, who's very vocal about not wanting to be part of whatever plan this is. The trail is narrow, shaded by tall raffia palms and fronds that whisper secrets in the morning breeze. The shrine is nestled at the edge of the village behind a cluster of sacred trees. As you approach, you smell incense, or maybe it's just burning leaves. The distinction feels irrelevant in this context. A tall woman sits on a mat at the entrance. She wears white chalk across her face and beads that click when she moves. She doesn't smile. She simply points to the mat and says, "The goat." You hand it over and the trade is done. Just like that. No coins, no receipts, not even a thank you mint. In Igbo society, this kind of transaction was as common as swapping yams for fish. Spiritual services, divination, protection charms, fertility rituals were valuable, and value required compensation. A goat was standard. A chicken if you were poor. A cow if you were really in trouble. And sometimes, if the issue was deeply personal, the payment might not be livestock at all. It might be a woven wrapper or a carved staff, or get this, a promise to name your firstborn after the priest. Talk about interest-free loans with eternal strings attached. Now here's your history fix across pre-colonial Igbo communities. Spiritual practitioners, devious oracles, diviners were fully embedded in the economic system. They didn't exist outside of trade. They were central to it. You couldn't open a new farm, marry, build a house, or travel to another town without first consulting the spirits. And each of those consultations, paid for in kind. Goat for guidance, yam for blessings, palm oil if you were hoping the spirits wouldn't snitch about your side hustle. And here's the quirky detail that makes you pause mid-step. Some oracles had price lists, but they were totally symbolic. Like a particularly famous oracle might accept only white-feathered chickens, or only goats that had never been tied. Why? Because tradition said so, which meant everyone nodded solemnly and pretended not to wonder if the spirits were just picky eaters. As you sit near the shrine, watching a long line of villagers come and go, each dropping off goods, each murmuring requests, you realize something crucial. This barter system wasn't just about goods. It was about needs, some practical, some metaphysical. And in that gray, uncertain space between material and spiritual trade became sacred. Historians still argue whether this blend of economy and spirituality was a deliberate mechanism of social control, or simply the organic evolution of a system where no separation existed between the sacred and the mundane. But what's clear is that spiritual services were never free, and yet they were never commercial in the modern sense. The payment wasn't about profit, it was about balance, reciprocity, restoring harmony between you, your community, and the universe via goat. You leave the shrine lighter both emotionally and physically now that the goat's gone. On the way back, you stop by a roadside stall where someone is offering dried kola nut in exchange for firewood. You don't have firewood, but you do have an extra strip of cloth. The trader eyes it, shrugs, and hands over the kola. You pop a piece into your mouth, bitter, chalky, and somehow grounding. Mid-chew, an older man nearby laughs. He tells you about the time he once tried to trade a lopsided clay pot for love potion. The priestess accepted the pot, but said the potion would take a long while to ferment. He's still waiting 20 years later. Love apparently is not a priority trade item in these parts. You both laugh, and he offers you a handful of dried plantain in exchange for a story. You oblige, telling him about your aunt's stolen okra and the very vocal goat. He chuckles, then offers advice you didn't ask for, and will probably ignore. By the time you get home, the sun is heavy and golden. Your aunt listens to the oracle's message with a straight face, then claps her hands and mutters something about needing a bigger broom. You leave her to it. Back in your hut, you sit down and start mentally inventorying your weak yams, gone cloth, gained salt, acquired goat, sacrificed okra mysteries, partially solved. All without touching a single coin. It's a strange kind of bookkeeping, this barter life. You don't record it in ink. You hold it in your body, in your memory, your relationships, your dreams. You lie back, letting your eyes drift shut. Somewhere another goat is being offered at another shrine. Somewhere someone is bartering a basket of smoked grass cutter for a charm against thunder. And somewhere a diviner is whispering to the wind, smiling quietly at the goat tied to a nearby tree. And you rest, knowing you've played your part in the oldest economy. There is one based not on numbers, but on needs. You're up before dawn again. The sky's still ink dark, and the air is thick with dew, and the muffled cluck of chickens stirring in their roosts. You scratch at a mosquito bite and fumble for your wrapper. Today's market day in a neighboring town, and you've been chosen. Okay, maybe volunteered to escort your uncle's prized raffia mats to the big market. You weren't exactly planning to spend your day haggling with strangers over floor coverings, but here we are. Your uncle's mats are top tier. He wove them himself, tight patterns, symmetrical edges dyed with rich earth tones. These mats aren't just functional, they're status symbols. People use them for weddings, shrine offerings, even burial rites. The raffia's been soaked, beaten, combed, and woven until it hums with texture. If you mess up this trade, you'll never hear the end of it. The journey is long and hot. You pass through palm groves and over a narrow stream where frogs chorus like an unruly band. The mats are balanced carefully on your head, and every now and then you have to stop and adjust. Around mid-morning, you arrive. Market is already buzzing. The scent of roasted maize and sweat is heavy in the air. You can barely hear yourself think over the shouting, the laughter, the bleating of goats being bartered for calabashes. You find your usual spot and lay the mats out with a dramatic flourish. Presentation matters. You sit behind them, smile politely, and wait for the customers to come, and they do. One woman wants to trade cowrie shells and a carved comb. A man offers dried bushmeat. A young girl asks if you'll accept a chicken and a small packet of ground pepper. You consider her offer. Chickens are valuable, but this one looks emotionally unstable. You politely decline. Here's your historical fact of the day. Raffia mats like these weren't just decorative or practical. They often functioned as currency. Yep. In many Igbo communities, finely woven mats were so standardized in size, quality, and utility that they were used in major exchanges like bride price negotiations and land transactions. If your mats were especially well made, you could trade them for several baskets of grain or even a share in communal farmland. So while you're sitting here thinking you're just offloading floor decor, you're actually participating in one of the most respected economic exchanges in the region. There's even a known conversion rate between mats and goats, though it varies slightly depending on whether the goat is still cute or already halfway to soup. Now let's pause for a quirky detail. Some families had signature weaving patterns passed down like heirlooms. If you traded in mats woven with your family's twist, maybe a looped border or a diagonal stripe, you were building reputation. People recognized your work, knew the quality, and were more likely to accept your trade without haggling. That's brand loyalty, 18th century Igbo style. A middle-aged man approaches your stall with a firm stride. He's wearing a wrapper that says, "I mean business," and he's got a basket full of smoked fish. You both nod, and the ritual begins. He squats. You lean forward. He picks up a mat, flips it over, and inspects the underside. You act like you're not watching, but you absolutely are. He grunts, then lays down his offer, 8 fish and a piece of soap. You shake your head. He adds a dried mango. You smile counter with 8 fish and a full calabash of palm wine. He winces. You raise an eyebrow. Finally, he nods. Deal struck. This is the heart of Igbo trade, no fixed prices, just mutual performance art. Historians still argue whether this system had internal standardization mechanisms, or if it was all vibes and social pressure. Some believe there were informal pricing circles where elders or seasoned traders set loose guidelines based on scarcity and supply. Others argue each market functioned independently, with rates fluctuating like mood swings. You're too busy counting fish to care. You wrap up the trade and place the goods in your sack. The mango's a nice bonus, you might not even share it. Across the way, a woman is trading her late husband's tools for a pair of goats. You overhear the negotiation. She emphasizes how he built a whole compound with these tools. The other trader examines them quietly, then nods. 2 goats. It's not just about metal, it's about memory. These items carry weight, not just value. You pack up your remaining mats just as a dust storm threatens to redecorate the entire market. Traders rush to protect their wares. A young boy offers to help you tie the bundle in exchange for half a roasted plantain. You agree. His knots are better than yours anyway. As you walk home, your mind wanders. You traded floor mats for fish mango and a better understanding of how trade here isn't linear, it's layered. Goods move, yes. But so do stories, reputations, obligations. A single raffia mat could pass through 10 hands in one season, each time changing shape slightly, through use, through memory, through meaning. By the time you reach your uncle's compound, the sun is low and golden again. He eyes your trade bag, grunts approvingly, and says nothing. That's how you know you did well. You lay on your mat one of the less fancy ones, and let the day dissolve into the cool of evening. Another trade day done. Another step through this strange, beautiful system where money doesn't exist, and yet everything has value. You wake to the sound of rhythmic pounding, not drums, not footsteps, but the unmistakable thump-thump of a mortar and pestle. Someone nearby is grinding cassava, and judging by the tempo, they're not in a good mood. You stretch, wince at the sore spot on your shoulder, and remember today's task. Your cousin's marriage rites are underway, and you've been roped into helping with the bride price delivery. No pressure, right? You shuffle out into the compound, blinking at the sunlight. Already there's a crowd, uncles arguing about goat sizes, aunts adjusting head wraps, a group of children giggling while trying to sneak bits of roasted yam from the ceremonial tray. It's controlled chaos. And at the center of it all is a large basket filled with items, not money, but goods carefully selected and symbolically arranged. You look inside. There's salt pepper, cola nut palm wine, 2 fowls a goat tethered reluctantly to a post, and of course, a length of imported cloth. This isn't just a shopping basket. It's currency, tradition, an emotional resume rolled into raffia. This is the bride price, and in traditional Igbo society, it's a full-blown production. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Bride price, or I am ego, was not just a symbolic gesture. It was a complex barter transaction that could involve dozens of items depending on the family lineage and status of the bride. There was no one-size-fits-all. Some communities followed detailed checklists passed down for generations. Others negotiated the items fresh for each marriage, adjusting based on current trade conditions. The perceived value of the bride, yes, we're cringing a bit, and family connections. The journey to the bride's compound isn't long, but it feels ceremonial. You're part of a small procession, some carrying yams, others balancing wine gourds, one poor soul leading the goat who has definitely figured out where it's going. You arrive and the air shifts. People straighten their backs. A group of older women sits outside the compound, watching you like you're late to a job interview. You set the items down, arranging everything neatly. The bride's family steps forward, inspecting the goods one by one. They murmur, they nod. They frown at the goat, who's chewing on its own rope in protest. Someone picks up the cloth, rubs it between their fingers, and sniffs. You're not sure if that's a good or bad sign. A debate breaks out. Apparently, the salt portion is a little light. Your uncle pulls you aside and whispers that they'll accept a jar of honey in exchange. You run off to find some bartering, a personal carved pendant you've had since childhood. It stings a little, but that's the thing about this system. Emotion and economy are always tangled up together. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some Igbo communities historically required items like broomsticks, sewing needles, or even money for the bride's brother's shaving razors as part of the bride price. These weren't random. They were coded gestures, tiny nods to deeper meanings. A needle signified readiness for domestic life, a broom symbolic of keeping the home clean and peaceful. A razor, mostly just an excuse for the bride's brothers to get something out of the deal, smart guys. And yes, historians still argue whether the bride price functioned more as compensation to the bride's family, or as a symbolic act of alliance between two lineages. Some even frame it as early contract law, where goods weren't just offerings, but enforceable markers of agreement. Others suggest it was always more fluid than legal, shaped by relationships, rather than fixed structures. You nod along to both theories, though you're currently more focused on whether anyone noticed you forgot to polish the wine gourd. Finally, everything's in place. The family accepts the goods, the goat is begrudgingly tied to a post, and the mood softens. The bride appears veiled, walking slowly toward her new family's side. The exchange is complete. No money changed hands, but the value here is undeniable. You breathe a sigh of relief. The pressure's off, for now. Later, you sit under a tree with your cousin, the newly married groom, eating from a shared bowl of pounded yam and okra soup. He nudges you with his elbow. "We did it," he says, mouth full. You smile. You did. But you're also thinking about that pendant you traded away. There's a lesson in that about how value isn't static, and how sometimes what you give up carries more weight than what you gain. He asks if you think the bride will be happy. You shrug. "She got a pretty decent goat," you reply. He laughs. You both know it's more than that, but it's easier to joke. The sun dips low, painting the sky with oranges and purples. Drums begin in the distance, someone's already celebrating. You close your eyes for a moment and think about how the day unfolded. There were no price tags, no receipts, no swipes or signatures. Just intention, tradition, negotiation, and trust. You don't need a bank when your value system is etched into the rhythm of your community. You lean back against the tree trunk, feeling the warmth of the earth beneath you, and let the sounds of distant laughter and clinking gourds lull you into that sleepy space between satisfaction and silence. The sun isn't even up yet, but your uncle's voice is. Loud, urgent, and coded in that special brand of exasperation only Igbo elders seem to have perfected. "Get up, we leave before the dew dries," he calls, and you groan quietly into your mat. Another long walk today, this time to visit your mother's lineage, but it's not a social visit, oh no. You're delivering tribute, or as your uncle dramatically calls it, maintaining the ropes that bind our ancestors together. You'd argue a simple palm wine gift would do the trick, but who's asking you wash your face with cold water, slip into your wrapper, and shoulder a calabash filled with smoked groundnut paste? The rest of the items, yam tubers, dried fish, a bolt of indigo-dyed cloth, are carried by your cousins. It's a procession of reciprocity. And it's your turn to participate in a tradition as old as the red clay paths you're walking. Welcome to lineage obligations, aka family tax, but make it historical. In Igbo society, kinship wasn't just about sharing a surname. It was the glue of economic, spiritual, and social systems. Family lines were bound by obligations, and those obligations were fulfilled through goods, never currency. These exchanges didn't just build relationships, they sustained them. You gave to your mother's people because they gave you life. You honored your father's brothers because they gave you name and land. It's like social networking, only with more yams and fewer humble brags. And here's your mainstream historical fact: lineage-based exchange systems often dictated who traded with whom and how often. In fact, some communities scheduled seasonal tribute deliveries where entire lineages prepared and exchanged specific goods. It wasn't just about tradition, it was an economic engine. Palm oil flowed one way, fish another, cloth the third. No coin ever touched a palm. You arrive mid-morning to a flurry of greetings. Women ululate, men clasp arms and nod. A child runs off to alert the elders. You're ushered under a thatched pavilion and offered water, then palm wine. Someone sets down a platter of ukwa, and you know the visit is official now. Everyone settles. The tribute basket is placed in the center, uncovered, admired. Then come the questions. Not what did you bring, but what message do your goods carry? You blink. They carry smoked fish, but of course that's not the real answer. Every item you've carried today holds symbolism. The yam says we till the earth as you did. The cloth says we remember your daughters. The groundnut paste. That one's a bit of a culinary piece, offering you did forget their last naming ceremony after all. The elder men nod as your uncle speaks on your behalf. It's all very ceremonial, poetic even. They respond in kind, offering your group a smaller basket in return. Inside, kola nuts, shea butter, a carved wooden spoon, and a new gourd, polished, beautiful, clearly handpicked. You realize with mild embarrassment that this entire tradition is a kind of relational balance sheet. Not in numbers, but in memory. You gave last time, they give this time. Maybe they give a bit more. Maybe you're slightly in debt. But no one's tallying exactly. It's not about accounting, it's about continuity. And here's your quirky detail for the night in some Igbo subgroups. These tribute visits involved metaphorical storytelling. You didn't say, here is yam for you. You said, we bring the swollen fruit of the earth, whose roots drank deeply for our shared name. It's florid, it's confusing, it's awesome. Imagine trying that at a supermarket. Behold, I offer you the white nectar frozen by the cow's patience. Milk. You're buying milk. But you'd probably get a discount just for the drama. Now, historians still argue whether these lineage-based exchanges were primarily symbolic acts of kin solidarity or more structured economic tools in disguise. Some scholars say the goods were just vessels for relational messaging, kind of like writing letters with yams. Others insist that these systems functioned as sophisticated proto-markets, moving goods across regions efficiently without ever needing coins. You stand to leave both baskets now exchanged, the obligation fulfilled. And even though no one wrote a receipt, you feel like a record has been made, one stored in smiles, nods, and the carefully chosen polish on that new gourd. On your way back, the conversation turns to who forgot the soap last year. You snicker as your cousin gets lightly roasted for it, and he defends himself with a passionate speech about transporting goods under rainy skies. Yeah, sure. Everyone remembers that day being perfectly dry. By the time you're home, your legs are tired, but your spirit feels kind of stitched in, like another little thread just pulled tight in the enormous fabric of your extended family. That night, you lie on your mat, turning the carved wooden spoon over in your hand. It's smooth, a bit warped, the edges clearly used. Not made for show, but for remembering. You wonder whose hands shaped it, and whether they ever imagined it traveling back to your family like this. You drift off thinking about yam metaphors, and whether your next visit should include a few lines of your own. Something about the sun cooking the patience of the traveler, or how smoked fish is love preserved in spice. You'll work on it. Later, the next morning is thick with humidity, the kind that wraps around your shoulders like a wet blanket and makes your hair defy gravity. You roll off your mat and step outside into a buzz of activity. Today, the elders are preparing for something important, a communal dispute resolution. Now, before you zone out, imagine this. No courtrooms, no gavel-banging judges, no impersonal paperwork. Instead, a large tree, a circle of elders with gray beards and knowing eyes, and, wait for it, a calabash of palm wine passed back and forth between witnesses. Welcome to Igbo conflict resolution, where justice is woven from dialogue, memory, and exchange, not coins. You're only a silent observer today, tasked with sweeping the compound and keeping the goats from interrupting. A modest job, but prime for eavesdropping. The dispute is between two men over a piece of land boundary issues, inheritance confusion, the usual suspects. Both are dressed with an air of self-righteousness, though one has brought cola nuts and the other has not. A bold move considering the stakes. The elders settle onto wooden stools beneath the shade of the udala tree. A few younger men sit just beyond the main circle, including you pretending to be deeply interested in adjusting your sandals while your ears strain to catch every word. Here's your mainstream historical fact: among the Igbo traditional justice systems, were heavily based on restitution, not punishment. If someone wronged you, the solution wasn't prison or a fine, it was restoration. You returned what was taken, compensated what was broken, or offered goods of equal value. Harmony was the ultimate goal, not legal vengeance. The community needed to move forward intact. And how was value determined in such cases? Through barter-based negotiation. The elders would suggest an appropriate repayment, perhaps a goat, a few yams, or even public labor. In more serious matters, the guilty party might need to provide palm oil textiles or a symbolic offering to the village shrine. The case unfolds slowly. The land in question is narrow but fertile, perfect for cassava. One man says it was gifted to him by his late uncle. The other insists it was loaned, not given, and that the family never approved the transfer. Tempers flare, but every time voices rise, an elder raises a hand and someone pours more palm wine. It's the Igbo version of saying, "Let's all take a breath." You learn quickly that these disputes aren't just about land or goats. They're about history. Oral testimony is everything. People are called to remember who farmed what, who built where, who witnessed what deal under which moon. And when memory gets fuzzy, as it often does, a respected elder might step in with, "I was there that day, and I remember." Cue dramatic silence. Everyone leans in. Now for your quirky tidbits sometimes to test honesty during disputes. A symbolic item was introduced: a stick wrapped in red thread, or a carved piece of sacred wood. The guilty party, folklore says, would avoid touching it out of fear that ancestral spirits might curse them. Did it work? Well, some people reportedly confessed on the spot just to avoid the object entirely. Modern lie detectors eat your heart out. Back under the tree, the elders are coming to a decision. After an hour of storytelling, cola chewing, and some seriously sharp side-eye exchanges, they reach a verdict: the land stays with the man who brought cola, but he must offer his cousin 4 large yams and a male goat by the next full moon to clean the air. That's the phrase they use, not as in wiping away a stench, but as in restoring peace and dignity. Historians still argue whether these forms of justice were more effective than colonial court systems introduced later. Some say they kept social order with less resentment and alienation. Others argue they lacked consistency and could reinforce existing hierarchies. But to the community gathered here, the decision feels final because it is final. There are no appeals, only palm wine and a handshake. As the session ends, people stand and begin talking about everything except the dispute. That's the unspoken rule. Once it's resolved, it's done. The man who lost the land is already laughing with someone over the goat he'll soon owe. You're still stuck thinking about how justice here doesn't come with a receipt, but with mutual understanding and the subtle accounting of honor. You gather the palm wine calabash, now mostly empty, and carry it back to the storage shed. On the way, a young woman nods at you and mutters, "At least no one tried to curse anyone this time." You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. You missed the last one. That night, as the stars prick the sky and cicadas tune up for their nocturnal concert, you lie on your mat and think about all the ways a goat can say, "I'm sorry." You wonder what might change in the modern world if apology involved more food and less bureaucracy. Your uncle shuffles past your doorway humming to himself. Somewhere nearby, someone's softly drumming on a wooden bowl, probably a child playing out today's drama with tiny carved figures. Maybe tomorrow they'll replay the whole hearing goat and all. You pull your wrapper up to your chin and let sleep pull you slowly under the scent of palm wine and red earth lingering faintly in the air. You're woken before dawn by the strange but unmistakable sound of cowbells. No cows in sight, but the gentle clanging is followed by the quiet rustle of baskets and the low murmur of women's voices. You peek out from under your wrapper. The women of the compound are preparing for Oruahia Market Day. You roll over trying to go back to sleep, but good luck with that. It's like trying to nap while someone hosts a cheerful stampede 10 feet away. Eventually, you give in, stretch, and wander outside, just in time to be handed a woven bag and told quite sweetly that you're coming along to help. The path to the market is already dotted with people. Some carry pots on their heads without so much as a wobble. Others pull reluctant goats or coax sleepy children along. A boy behind you trips and sends a handful of dried pepper flying into the air like crimson confetti. The laughter that follows is the warm, communal kind, not mocking, but shared. The market itself is a sensory carnival. Smells of smoked fish, fresh ginger, and fermented locust beans swirl through the air. A woman calls out prices in a melodic chant. Another rhythmically beats ugba in a wooden bowl, her bangles jingling like percussion. The sun rises higher, glinting off brass bracelets and sweaty brows. This isn't just shopping. It's a network. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Traditional Igbo markets operated on a 4-day week, Eke, Ori, Afor, and Nkwo, with each village having its own dedicated market day. Trade rotated across regions, creating a natural economic rhythm. This system didn't require coinage. Instead, people relied on known equivalents, a bundle of firewood for a bowl of gari, a woven mat for a basket of snails. Value was dynamic, relational, and surprisingly efficient. You follow your aunt as she zigzags between stalls, trading dried okra for salt, then salt for palm oil, then palm oil for smoked bushmeat. It's like watching a magician swap one thing into another across dimensions. She hasn't touched a single coin, but the bag gets heavier and heavier. A man waves at her, offering 2 yam tubers for the dyed cloth on her arm. She declines counteroffers with a small calabash of shea butter, and after a dramatic pause, he accepts. You think this isn't a barter? This is art, performance, maybe even sport. Nearby, a cluster of older women are engaged in what sounds like a furious argument over cassava grating tools. But no fists are raised, no security guards in sight. One woman suddenly bursts out laughing, the others join in, and the tension evaporates like steam. You blink. Lesson learned. And here's your quirky tidbit: in some Igbo markets, children were trained from a very young age to sell imaginary goods as practice. These play markets helped them learn the value of items, negotiation techniques, and social confidence, all before losing their baby teeth. You think of it as early capitalism without the existential dread. At one point, your aunt introduces you to a friend who sells black soap. She asks what you've brought. You hold up your small packet of dried utazi leaves. Her eyes light up. Apparently, her daughter's been looking for that exact herb to treat a cold. She offers you something unexpected, in return a small clay amulet. You hesitate. An herb for a charm, she smiles. It's for travelers, she says. Protection, trade luck, and here's the scholarly squabble for today. Historians still argue whether traditional Igbo market exchange should be called barter at all. Some argue it was a sophisticated, non-monetary economy with pricing systems built on social consensus rather than fixed rates. Others say barter undersells the depth and fluidity of what happened, suggesting instead a relational economy where trust, memory, and reputation formed the real currency. You tuck the amulet into your bag anyway, just in case. Later, you sit under the awning of a palm wine stall, sipping slowly and watching the market begin to wind down. The sun has shifted overhead. The crowd has thinned. Sellers count their goods. Buyers gather their baskets, and the air has the sleepy hum of contentment. A little boy walks past with a lizard tied to a string. No one blinks. The goat you saw this morning is now napping peacefully under a table of yams, its owner nearby snoring louder than it does. You smile. There's something about this place that wraps around you like a warm scarf. No receipts, no debit cards, no sales tax, just trade trust. And maybe a little drama if someone steps on your pepper pile. Your aunt claps her hands twice to signal it's time to go. You shoulder the bag now full of everything from snail shells to red clay pots and fall into step behind her. On the walk home, she teaches you how to balance the load without straining your neck. You fail spectacularly, but laugh hard enough not to care. That night, you sort the day's haul beside your mat, pulling out the little clay charm last. You set it beside your pillow and think about everything you traded, everything you learned, and how no currency ever changed hands. And still, everything found its value. The next few days blur together in that gentle, timeless rhythm of village life roosters. At dawn, laughter spilling from courtyards, the soft thud of pestles turning yams into pounded magic. You start to feel like you've always lived this way, and maybe you have in some distant ancestral pocket of your DNA. But just when things are feeling predictable, someone mentions it. The distant traders are coming. Your ears perk up. Distant traders. You find your uncle reclining under the mango tree, scratching his chin like he's just waiting for you to ask. He smiles. They bring salt from the coast, he says, and beads. Strange things. Your curiosity is now fully awake and sleep is officially postponed. That night, you lie in your mat, thinking about it, strangers arriving with goods from far-off places. Not just village-to-village swaps now. We're talking long-distance trade. The slow, deliberate braid that ties together entire regions without a single coin. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Long before European contact, the Igbo were part of sprawling trade routes that stretched from the Atlantic coast all the way into the interior of West Africa. Items like salt, copper, and beads traveled hundreds of miles through networks of trust, memory, and middlemen. No banks, no ledgers, just human relationships. When the traders arrive, it's nothing like the traveling circus you might be picturing. No horns, no parades, just quiet competence. Men with lean muscles and sun-darkened skin leading pack animals loaded with palm oil, cola nuts, and cloth. One of them wears a necklace of cowrie shells. Another smells like wood smoke and something spicy you can't quite place. You're fascinated by the cargo. One man unwraps a bundle of indigo-dyed fabric so vibrant it makes the nearby cassava look like beige wallpaper. Another offers a brass bracelet etched with symbols you don't recognize. You help unload goods into a temporary stall, and that's when you hear it. The bargaining language isn't entirely Igbo. Some of the phrases twist into unfamiliar tones. Turns out many traders used a blend of dialects or developed their own pidgin-esque shorthand. It's not just about speaking, it's about understanding across boundaries. The market becomes a multilingual ballet. Here's your quirky tidbit: in certain regions, traders were known to carry small carved tokens, almost like passports or merchant badges, showing the symbols of villages they had safe passage through. Lose one of those, and not only would your trade suffer, but you might be denied entry or even hospitality. In a world without visas, your carved ivory chip did the talking. You hang close as your uncle barters with a coastal trader for salt. He offers dried fish, then adds raffia cloth, and finally agrees to throw in a carved stool. The trader nods deal. A handshake seals it, followed by a brief exchange of family news. They've met before. That's the real currency here: continuity. And now for your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Igbo's vast trade networks were truly stateless, or whether they functioned under decentralized but powerful economic alliances like town unions or secret societies that enforced trade norms behind the scenes. Was it anarchy that worked, or invisible governance with style? Either way, it worked. It worked for generations. And you begin to understand that what seemed like just barter is actually a web, intricate, resilient, and deeply human. You spend the afternoon listening to stories. One trader tells of crossing the Niger River with his canoe full of pottery, narrowly avoiding a crocodile attack. You're not sure if he's exaggerating, but it makes for a gripping tale. Another speaks of trading in the Delta and picking up strange new peppers that burn like betrayal. He grins, then offers you one. You wisely decline. Later, as the sun drops into the horizon and the sky goes that deep pink only Africa seems to own, a small gathering forms around a fire. The traders pull out instruments, wooden flutes, a talking drum, even a rattle made from dried seed pods. Stories become songs, songs become claps, and before you know it, someone drags you into a slow, shuffling dance you pretend to hate but secretly love. You notice something as the night unfolds. No one is keeping tally on a ledger. No receipts. Yet everyone knows who owes what, who traded fairly, who to trust. Reputation is the invisible ink that records every deal. By the time you drift to sleep under the stars, you understand that the idea of money isn't about metal or paper, it's about agreement. And in this world, trust is wealth. You dream of canoes gliding across moonlit rivers, of brass bracelets clinking together, and of voices that blend dialects into something entirely new. You dream of a world trading not in numbers, but in relationships. The traders are gone by morning, as if swept away by the wind. All that's left behind are footprints in the red soil and a few faint scorch marks where their cooking fires burned low through the night. You run your fingers over the place where one sat, half expecting the warmth to still be there. It isn't, but something else lingers: curiosity. Because now you're wondering, how do people remember who owes what? How does a whole community, with no ledgers or banking apps or tap-to-pay anything, keep track of obligations, trade, credit, and trust over time? You don't have to wait long for an answer. That afternoon, while shelling groundnuts with your aunt, you ask, and she nods thoughtfully. Igbo Ichi, she says, and that's the beginning of your next lesson. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In traditional Igbo society, systems of status and age grades were crucial in organizing social and economic life. A person's reputation, especially among elders and titled men and women, functioned like a credit score. If you were known to cheat or hoard word, would spread fast, and you'd find yourself locked out of trade opportunities. Igbo Ichi refers to the ritual facial scarification, once practiced among the Igbo elite, deeply symbolic, often signaling that the person had achieved a certain level of moral and social standing. And you guessed it, someone bearing that mark could trade far beyond their hometown without fear of rejection. Their face was their passport. You imagine walking into a village, no need to explain who you are. The marks say it all. No ID, no need for a Google review of your business. Just skin-deep status and centuries of tradition etched on your face. But not everyone needed scars to have credit. Families carried reputations across generations. You hear about one grandmother who could walk into a market with empty hands, pick up a basket of okra, and walk away, everyone knowing she'd repay within a moon cycle. Her grandson, decades later, still benefits from her spotless record. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some traders developed elaborate credit chants, a kind of verbal receipt system. After a deal, they'd sing a specific pattern or rhyme naming what was taken and by whom. Others listening would remember it almost like a community ledger. Want to deny the deal? Good luck. 10 people can recite your debt in song. One afternoon, you follow a young woman as she negotiates with a traveling potter. She wants a water jar but has no goods on her. Instead, she offers a promise, not a flimsy handshake or vague, "I'll come back." She invokes her family name, then calls over a boy to bear witness. The potter nods and hands over the jar. Just like that. You blink. "Wait, is that it? Come back on the next inquo," she tells you. "I'll pay him with smoked fish." And here we go with your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these memory-based credit systems were sustainable long-term, especially as trade volumes increased. Some say the system began to fray under population growth and outside influences like colonial rule or the introduction of currency. Others argue that the system was adaptive, adding new layers like written marks or community witnesses when memory alone wasn't enough. But here's the thing, for centuries it did work, and it worked beautifully. You begin to notice these systems everywhere. A child returns a borrowed basket and receives a roasted yam in thanks. A man repairs a neighbor's fence and earns a promise of help at harvest. Reciprocity is the glue. No IOUs needed, just a shared understanding that everything circles back. Later that evening, you sit around the fire as your uncle tells a story about a traveling carver who once received a goat in advance of sculpting a family shrine. He disappeared for 3 market cycles. Everyone assumed he'd skipped town. But sure enough, on the 4th cycle, he returned, carving complete. The family was so impressed, they gave him a second goat. No penalty, no interest, just respect. You chuckle. That wouldn't fly in a modern city. Imagine explaining to a bank that your goat sculptor just needs a little more time. But in this world, patience has value, and relationships outlast receipts. As you fall asleep that night, you wonder what would happen if we measured wealth not in things, but in trust. If our net worth was based on the strength of our promises, the number of people who could count on us, the times we showed up when it mattered. You drift off, and somewhere in your dreams, someone sings a trade chant, listing the names of those who always pay back what they owe. You hope your name's on it. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth and smoldering firewood when you're jolted awake by the loud, familiar caw of a rooster who clearly skipped charm school. You groan and pull your wrapper tighter, but it's no use. Morning in the village has no snooze button. Still half asleep, you wander toward the kitchen hut where breakfast is underway. Your aunt is grinding pepper with the determination of someone preparing for war. She smiles as you enter and gestures toward a calabash of water. "You'll need your energy," she says. We're visiting the Umuwada today. The who you learn on the way that the Umuwada, the daughters of the land, are a powerful force in Igbo life. Women born into a village but married outside it. Sounds harmless enough, but in practice, these women often act as arbiters of justice, keepers of tradition. And here's where it gets spicy: economic regulators. They're not just aunties. They're the original board of directors. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Umuwada wielded significant influence in Igbo society, especially in matters of conflict resolution and market regulation. In many communities, they could organize boycotts or fine traders who used false measurements or dishonest scales. Essentially, they were walking, talking consumer protection bureaus with attitude. You reach the compound where today's gathering is being held. There's palm wine boiled maize and a semicircle of women whose eyes seem to read thoughts you haven't even had yet. You sit quietly, trying to blend into the scenery. Spoiler, it doesn't work. A young woman stands to present a case. She accuses a fellow trader of diluting palm oil with red dye sacrilege of the highest order. Gasps all around. The accused protests, but the Umuwada are unmoved. They murmur among themselves, then deliver their judgment: a public apology restitution of 2 calabashes of oil and a ban from trading until the next Ori day. You're stunned. No police, no court, but everyone nods in agreement. Justice served Igbo style. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some cases, the Umuwada enforced trade ethics using symbolic acts. One method involved laying down a row of palm fronds at a guilty person's stall. No one would dare cross them. It was like taping off a crime scene, but with foliage and a side of shame. After the session, you speak with one of the elder women. She tells you about her days trading in Onitsha, a bustling river port. There, women controlled entire market sectors: cloth, pottery, even livestock. They set prices, settled disputes, and coordinated with other guilds of women across villages. "You think we waited for men to do that?" she asks, arching an eyebrow. And now for your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the economic power of Igbo women declined due to colonialism alone, or whether internal cultural shifts played a role. Some argue colonial authorities favored male chiefs and councils, sidelining the traditional structures, like the Umuwada and market guilds. Others suggest the change was more gradual, a mix of outside pressure and internal adaptation. You wander through the market afterward, this time with new eyes. You notice which stalls are busiest. Most of them are run by older women with quick tongues and quicker hands. You spot a woman measuring ground crayfish by hand, not by scale. Trust again. If she cheated, her stall would empty faster than you could say spoiled ogiri. You help carry a bundle back to the compound. It's heavier than expected. That's trade weight, your aunt jokes. Not for lazy backs. As the sun begins to dip and the shadows stretch long across the packed earth, you sit outside with a bowl of yam porridge and watch a group of girls practicing their market cries, calling out imaginary prices in sing-song voices. You realize this is how it all begins. The next generation already preparing, already learning the ropes of an economy not built on coins or contracts, but on memory, rhythm, and fairness, enforced by watchful eyes and seasoned voices. You ask your aunt if the Umuwada ever made mistakes. She nods. Of course, but we fix them. That's the point. You think of all the systems you've known that don't fix their mistakes. The markets that crash, the banks that lie, the systems where the little guy has no voice. And then you think of this courtyard, where even palm fronds can speak. That night, you drift to sleep with the murmur of women's voices in your ears, rising and falling like an ocean tide. You dream of a world where trade has rules, not just profits, where truth is weighed like yam on a wooden scale, and where sometimes justice comes dressed in colorful wrappers, holding a spoon. The next morning, you wake to a hush unusual for this usually bustling village. There's no pounding of yam, no excited banter from the palm wine sellers. Just a calm stillness, as if the earth itself is holding its breath. You ask what's going on, and your cousin leans in with a conspiratorial whisper. It's Okike Day, the sacred rest. You blink. Rest, no work. In a village that practically breathes commerce, that's when you learn that the Igbo, for all their hustle and enterprise, built intentional pauses into the rhythm of life. Today, trading stops. Fields are left alone. Even the chickens look vaguely unbothered. Because Okike, a spiritual day of reverence, is not just about the gods. It's about balance. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Igbo traditional calendar was structured around a 4-day market week, Eke, Orie, Afo, and Nkwo. But certain days within the lunar cycle were designated for spiritual observance or village-wide rest. During these times, markets were suspended. It wasn't an inconvenience, it was a safeguard for social cohesion and reflection. But don't be fooled by the silence. Beneath it is order. Ritual, collective breath. You help sweep the compound with an old straw broom, not out of obligation, but as part of the sacred pause. Your uncle appears face calm, wearing his best wrapper, not for a meeting, but for an ancestral shrine visit. The stillness isn't empty, it's pregnant with reverence. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some Igbo communities, people believed that doing business on a sacred rest day could anger not just the gods, but the ancestors who were thought to observe trade ethics from beyond. Stories floated around of goats vanishing, yams rotting overnight, or mysteriously ill traders who dared break the no-market pact. Coincidence maybe, but do you really want to take that risk? The rest day gives you time to observe the non-material side of trade. A group of children sits beneath a tree pretending to haggle over pebbles. No goods exchanged, just negotiation roleplay. One boy puffs out his chest, insisting his imaginary fish is fresh from the river, not the stream. The girl next to him narrows her eyes. You lie like a lizard in the sun. You chuckle. Even their play holds echoes of the marketplace. But today it's all pretend. No real deals. Just rhythm rest and reflection. You help prepare a small offering of kola nut and palm wine. It's taken to the family shrine set under the watchful gaze of carved wooden ancestors. No grand sermon, just a few whispered words of thanks, a nod, a shared silence. And now, your scholarly debate historians still argue whether the Igbo market pauses were primarily religious or whether they also served socio-economic functions, like preventing burnout, regulating competition, or stabilizing trade rhythms across multiple villages. Some even suggest these rest days helped enforce synchrony in long-distance trade routes, forcing traders to align with collective cycles. You sit under a tree with an elder who smokes a curved pipe that looks older than time itself. He tells you about a trader who once ignored a rest day. The next week, no one would trade with him. Not out of superstition, but out of principle. He broke trust, the elder says. So we broke ties. You think about all the systems today that never pause. Always open, always running. No room for breath. But here you see how the rest day builds resilience. It reminds people that wealth isn't just goods, it's gratitude. That community isn't just shared space, it's shared rhythm. That even the most seasoned trader needs silence, not just success. As the day fades, the stillness deepens. The market stalls are quiet, but not abandoned. They're merely sleeping like a well-fed cat curled beneath a stool. You pass one and swear you can still smell smoked fish and pepper lingering like a half-forgotten song. Later, you sit with your aunt, who is cracking roasted ground nuts into a calabash bowl. Tomorrow, she says, the traders will return, but tonight we rest. And somehow that feels more powerful than any bargain struck over cloth or salt. You fall asleep listening to the lullaby of insects and the low croak of frogs by the yam ridge. The marketplace sleeps. The gods are quiet. Even the wind feels slower, as if it too is obeying the sacred pause. You dream not of trade, not of goods, but of stillness itself, of the space between deals, the inhale before the sale, the value of simply being. When the next morning arrives, the stillness lifts like mist over the hills. The village exhales. Laughter returns, chickens argue again, and smoke from dozens of breakfast fires curls into the sky like a restart signal. Trade is back, and so are the traders. But something's changed. You notice it as you walk toward the central square, now reawakening with crates of snails, woven baskets, dried herbs, and chatter at full volume. The change isn't in the goods, but in the people. They carry themselves a little lighter, like that sacred rest scrubbed off a layer of dust. Their greetings are warmer, their jokes louder, their haggling just as fierce. Today you're headed somewhere different. The palm wine vendor tells you there's a gathering of age-grade groups near the river bend. And where there's a gathering, there's trade. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Igbo age-grade systems were more than just social clubs. They were engines of civic responsibility and economic organization. People of the same age banded together to dig roads, enforce market rules, even manage group labor contracts for large farms or construction. And crucially, they pooled resources to create miniature economic safety nets. You arrive to see rows of young men hoisting yams onto carts, joking and jostling, while women in matching wrappers organize a potluck of sorts, a buffet of trade samples from each member's household. It's not a market day. It's a trade rehearsal, a kind of cooperative commerce dry run. One elder watches approvingly. That's our future, he says, learning to build before they need to. You chuckle as one boy drops a bundle of cassava and gets mock-scolded by his peers. They're playing rough, but you can see it. They're learning accountability, learning to trade without money, learning to manage collective success. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some age-grade groups had their own trade symbols, simple wood carvings, embroidered patches, or colored beads that allowed them to identify each other across villages. Flash the symbol, and you might get a discount, or at least avoid the rookie markup. Kind of like a vintage loyalty card minus the plastic. But with all these networks and trust webs, you wonder what happens when someone cheats or disappears without paying. What happens when the trust breaks? The answer lies in something called nsogbu, a word that translates loosely as trouble, but in trade context, it refers to a formal grievance, especially around debts or unfair dealings. If someone breaks a trade agreement, it's not private drama, it becomes a community concern. The elders may be summoned, the offender's family consulted, and reparations negotiated. It's messy, but deeply communal. Now, for your scholarly debate, historians still argue whether these systems could have scaled beyond small to mid-sized villages. Some suggest they would have collapsed under the pressure of large-scale trade or external commerce. Others argue that the tight-knit fabric and decentralized checks made them more adaptable than we give credit for, perhaps even more resilient than early colonial economic models. You sit under a palm tree and watch as the age-grade members hold a quick, impromptu council. One member's goat escaped and trampled another's cassava mound. Laughter turns into serious tones. Hands point, voices rise, but no fists. After 10 minutes of deliberation, they agree on restitution, a helping hand during replanting, and a split share of dried okra at the next Unquo market. justice goat style. Later, a group of older teens invites you to join their fire circle. They're planning a trip to a neighboring village to offer a trade showcase, each member bringing one unique item to barter. Not for profit, they say, but for practice, for relationship building, for prestige. You're reminded that here trade is rarely about the thing itself. It's about what the thing represents. Relationships, reputations, readiness. One of them turns to you and says, "If you trade only with your hands, you'll go hungry. You have to trade with your name." You nod, feeling the weight of that. That night, you sit by your usual sleeping mat, replaying the day's events in your mind. Not just the yams or okra or goats, but the rhythm of it all. The way these systems cradle the individual inside the group. The way every person is part of something longer, older, deeper. You fall asleep to the sound of distant drumming. You don't know if it's ceremonial or just celebration, but either way, it's the heartbeat of a people who've figured out how to trade without cash and how to keep their names clean even when the yams run short. By now, the days in the village have begun to blur, not in boredom, but in rhythm. You no longer check for clocks. You just listen. To the rooster's call, to the market drums, to the gossip by the well. Trade here doesn't tick like a watch. It sways like a hammock, back and forth, back and forth. Today you're led to a quiet part of the village, a shaded grove where elders gather beneath an ancient iroko tree. You're told it's time you witness the elders' market. Not a place of buying or bartering exactly, but where wisdom is exchanged like currency. At first you expect folklore, maybe a lecture. But what you find is far more intricate, a full-blown economic council, just not the kind that wears suits or squints at spreadsheets. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Many Igbo communities operated on dual-layer governance, formal councils of elders and informal yet powerful trade collectives. When these overlapped trade policies could be debated, adjusted, and enforced without any written law. Instead, decisions were recorded in memory, consensus, and repetition. You sit cross-legged listening to a dispute about cola nut allocations between two distant hamlets. It's slow-moving, almost drowsy. But each speaker's tone, posture, and pause are telling a whole story. They're not arguing. They're persuading, deliberating in metaphor and parable. One elder talks about planting too many yams in a cracked basket. You're not entirely sure what that means, but everyone nods gravely. You nod too, just in case. Then a woman rises. She's known for controlling the pepper trade, and she has a voice like sharp flint. She recounts how one trader tried hoarding all the pepper during a drought season, spiking the price. A collective decision was made to ban him from the next 3 market days. Lesson learned. Here's your quirky tidbit: in some Igbo communities, stubborn traders could be cursed with a symbolic ritual, placing snail shells and bitter leaves at their doorstep. Not dangerous, but deeply embarrassing. Like being roasted on a community-wide group chat, but with vegetables. As the council disperses, you're left with the sense that everything here, every yam, every pot, every choice, is part of a network of memory. Trade isn't simply transaction, it's tradition with teeth. Later, you're taken on a long walk to the outskirts of the village. Your guide, a wiry man named Obina, points to the remains of an old trade trail. Overgrown now, but once he says it connected 5 villages. That's where we walked with salt and soap, he says. By foot, barefoot, under sun and rain. No coins, just clout. You try to imagine it. A trail without signs, yet every trader knew the way. Each bend held a story. Each rock knew your footsteps. You're told certain trees served as trade markers. You'd tie a leaf to a branch to indicate what goods you had, or whether you needed safe passage or lodging. No Wi-Fi, but plenty of bars, tree bars. Now, for your scholarly debate, historians still argue how far these cashless systems reached geographically. Some claim they were strictly local, village to village. Others point to oral traditions and archaeological evidence suggesting wider regional trade routes, possibly linking Igbo traders to communities as far as the Niger Delta and even up into Hausa lands. The jury's still out. You help Obinna stack firewood on his shoulder, and he tells you of a time when his grandfather carried dye blocks on this path. Blue dye called uri used to color cloth. He'd trade it for red camwood powder, then bring that home to sell to women making ceremonial body paint. He didn't need money, Obinna says. He needed memory and manners. You walk back with sore feet and a deeper sense of the unseen roadmaps beneath everything here. That night at dinner, a little boy tries to sell you a carved bead using what he calls future repayment. You ask what that means, and he grins. I'll give you 2 mangoes when they're ripe. You buy the bead. He dances away like he just closed $1 million deal. You think back to all the systems that rely on numbers alone. Algorithms, spreadsheets, cards that swipe but don't smile. And then you think of the walking trails, the Iroko councils, the snail shell warnings. You think of how trade here is a living thing. Not perfect, but deeply human. As you settle into sleep, the village quiets. Even the dogs curl in shadows full and soft. You dream of cracked baskets and pepper hoarders and boys trading mango promises. Somewhere in your sleep, an old voice says, memory is the first currency. Never spend it carelessly. The final morning comes not with fanfare, but with a hush of familiarity. You rise to the sounds you've come to know, the sharp trill of weaver birds, the clink of clay pots being set down, the rhythmic sweeping of dusty earth. Today doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like a deep breath before the next step. The market is alive again, vibrant and gleaming under the late morning sun. But instead of rushing in, you walk slowly through it, now able to read its language. The way someone nods tells you more than any coin ever could. A shared smile over a wrapped packet of ogbono seeds is a contract. A pointed glance at a vendor's mat still empty is a whispered concern, did she fall ill? Has something happened? You're not just passing through anymore. You're participating. And today, you're here to witness one of the rarest, most respected exchanges, a multi-village trading pact. Here's your mainstream historical fact: inter-village trade among the Igbo often relied on personal trust networks rather than written treaties. Leaders from multiple communities would convene to discuss safe passage routes, equitable exchange ratios, and dispute protocols, essentially building a mutual honor system. You arrive as 3 delegations gather under a canopy of raffia palm leaves. Each group wears distinct cloth patterns, bright yellows, deep reds, ocean blues. They sit in a wide circle, calabashes between them filled with symbolic goods, dried fish, camwood, tobacco leaves, even a smooth white stone said to cool tempers. The meeting opens not with terms, but with folktales. Each side shares a story. Laughter bubbles up. Elders clap slowly in appreciation. This isn't stalling, it's calibration. Trust doesn't come from ledgers here. It comes from rhythm-shared memory laughter before negotiation. And here's your quirky tidbit: in some villages, trading pacts were sealed with symbolic dances. Each side would perform a short movement, spinning, stomping, or mimed farming, offering a gesture of goodwill. Refusing to dance was like refusing a handshake, a snub no one forgot. After the dance terms are discussed, goods will move every second, unquo day. Each group agrees to provide escorts through bush paths. If a trader is wronged, the offending village will host a public apology ceremony with kola nut, of course. No signatures, just people standing up, stating their names, and promising with their reputations. Now, for your scholarly debate, some anthropologists argue that these inter-village agreements, though informal, laid early groundwork for what could have become a federated economic model long before colonial borders imposed artificial governance. Others see them as too reliant on personal relationships to scale up reliably. Both views have merit. Neither tells the full story. As the meeting concludes, food is shared. The stone of temper is passed around and held by each delegate. You're offered a turn, and you press its cool surface to your forehead. It's strangely calming. Symbolic, sure, but symbols matter here. Later, you sit with a trader you've come to know, an older woman named Mama Nkechi, who sells fermented locust beans. Her smile is mischievous, and her sales pitch is lethal. She's wrapping up for the day, and you ask what makes trade work here without cash or contract. She leans in, lowers her voice like she's revealing a secret. You want to know the truth, she says. The truth is, we're all just guessing. You blink. Guessing, she chuckles. Every trade, every deal, it's a risk. You trust the face in front of you. You remember the face behind you. You hope the next one is kind. That's it. No magic. You nod, but deep down you know that is the magic. And now the day is done. You walk back through the village, passing familiar faces. Someone waves from the goat pen. Another offers you a roasted plantain unasked. The market is being swept again, everything reset for tomorrow. You lie down for one final night, and the hum of the fan you imagined in the intro finally finds you not from a machine, but from crickets and breeze and far-off drums. You've seen trade without cash, without banks, without receipts. But not without trust, not without rhythm, not without soul. You close your eyes. And now, as the night deepens and the last ember of that distant cooking fire fades, your breath slows to match the heartbeat of this place. You're no longer tracing history. You're resting inside it. The footsteps on the red earth are long gone, but their echoes remain. The whispered deals, the silent nods, the hands passing goods, like passing stories, all still happening in some form somewhere. Even your thoughts begin to stretch like worn cloth, soft and familiar, unraveling gently at the edges. You're floating now on memories you didn't know were yours. A wrapped packet of dried pepper, a tree that marks the path, a face lit by firelight promising mangoes someday. You feel the pulse of trade, not fast, not urgent, just steady, human, real. Outside your imagined window, a fan hums, or maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's the marketplace sleeping. Either way, it tells you it's safe to drift. You don't need to understand every system. You just need to feel the quiet in the spaces between, the value in the stillness, the worth of a good name. Tomorrow the markets will open again, but tonight they sleep, and so do you. Good night.